The NBA ecosystem of teams is in many ways like a high school. You've got the big market teams who represent the rich and popular kids that win all the people-based awards. There are the achievers. They can come as quiet nerds or intensely competitive type A's, but regardless of their approach, you'll often see them somewhere at the top of the class. And the NBA even has its own has-been, the former star athlete that no one wants to associate with because, well, he's a dick.
Last time the New York Knicks won a championship, I was 5 years old. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm 51.
The rest of the league is like the rest of us when we were in high school, with our own cliques and overall pretty normal. Most teams have a long enough history or are beloved in their small markets, giving them an identity that allows them to tug along until they stumble upon a savior. But the New Orleans Pelicans, the NBA's youngest franchise on paper, has never been able to be anything more than the league's fly on the wall. Yet with some lottery luck in 2019, the Pelicans were able to draft Zion Williamson, the NBA's most hyped prospect since LeBron James, and more importantly, the man that can give the Pelicans their identity in this hypothetical NBA high school. But the Pelicans have been in this position before, and they know that. For as surefire of a star Zion is, they may screw things up if they rest on their laurels. For this video, I'm going to talk about the direction the Pelicans need to steer their ship to hopefully succeed and carve out their name in the NBA during the Zion Williamson era. What's up guys, it's Colin back with another team analysis video. You guys seem to really like these videos, so comment down below the next team you would like to see me talk about. If you're new, hit that subscribe button and join this journey as we grind to 10k subs. Now, let's talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. And before I talk about how they can succeed, let me first explain the cyclical beginning of this franchise's plight for an NBA identity. Since the then Hornets relocated from Charlotte to New Orleans in 2002, they have had a real difficulty establishing a connection to the city. According to ESPN's attendance tracker, the Pelicans have been in the bottom third of the league in attendance every year since 2010. This is largely because the city is 1. Still recovering from the devastating effects of Hurricane Katrina from almost a decade and a half ago, and 2. Fully invested in the success of the more high-profile New Orleans Saints of the NFL. And it's also pretty tough to establish a connection with your fan base when your first few mascots looked like this. Predicated from that is the fact that there have been plenty of rumors of the team potentially relocating. This threat is not without merit, considering New Orleans was ranked number 29 by Forbes in its list of NBA franchise valuations. Putting that all together shows just how important it is that the Pels dig deeper roots within the NBA ecosystem. I mentioned at the top of the video that a lot of these middling franchises taste real success once they get a franchise savior. While the Pelicans are optimistic that Zion will be exactly that, they thought the same of their last franchise cornerstone, Anthony Davis. Davis was selected by the Pelicans with the first pick in the 2012 NBA draft. In his 7 years with the Pelicans, AD was a 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA first-team selection, made 3 All-Defensive teams, and was top 5 in MVP voting twice. Yet despite all of the individual accolades he gobbled up in New Orleans, Anthony Davis only made the playoffs in 2 of those 7 years, and has only 1 playoff series win under his belt. He infamously requested for a trade, and after an irritatingly long saga of immaturity, the Pelicans shipped him out to LA and received a return of promising young players and picks. Fortunately for them, they would get the top pick in the next draft to pair alongside those young players. The problem is that this was almost the exact same scenario 8 years prior when they traded Chris Paul to the LA Clippers for Eric Gordon and change. And I mean it when I say that these situations are eerily similar. The Hornets drafted CP3 with the 4th pick in 2005. He would make 4 All-Star games and, like Anthony Davis, 3 All-NBA teams, 3 All-Defensive teams, and was top 5 in MVP voting twice. But also like Anthony Davis, the playoff success just wasn't there. He would only make the playoffs 3 times, and can you guess how many playoff series he won in New Orleans? Yeah, just 1 series win before expressing a desire to be traded, then being shipped out to LA prior to the 2011-2012 lockout season. Now, the Pelicans' haul for Davis was significantly better than for Paul's, but that doesn't remove from the fact that they have been in this exact position before. While it does feel like deja vu, the Pelicans can cut that short if they push the right buttons starting now. The hiring of David Griffin as VP for basketball operations was a good start, but just like Michael Jordan said in The Last Dance, the players win the championship. Luckily for this iteration of the Pelicans, they've got a bunch of really, really good players. The New Orleans Pelicans, as currently constructed, already have a really good team. While 28-36 doesn't scream good, remember that injuries had them hobbling out of the gate. But since December 17th, or around the time when Derek Favors returned from an absence, they've been 22-14. And since Zion's debut on January 22nd, they've posted a +4 net rating, which is 7th in the league in that span. The Pelicans have been able to achieve this recent success largely because they've grouped in some high-character veterans to round out their young core. In fact, the Pelicans starting five of Favors, Zion, Ingram, Holiday, and Ball has the #1 net rating among 5-man lineups in the entire league. Minimum 200 minutes played. But make no mistake about it, the Pelicans, both now and in the future, are defined by their young studs. And they have to remember that moving forward. First and foremost, Zion Williamson. Now I'm gonna assume that most of you have heard of this guy, so I won't expound much further on the hype.
Oh, same spot, same results. Okay, I'm buying a Zion Williamson jersey tomorrow.
We all know he's a freak of nature and unlike anything the NBA has ever seen. But it's that uniqueness which makes it important that the Pelicans be open to experimentation because we don't know the context in which a player with his skill set will really thrive. What's good is that the Pelicans have shown the willingness to do that, at least so far. The Pels' best 5-man lineup that I said earlier has Zion playing the 4 with Favors flanking him at 5, and this accounts for about 230 of Zion's 564 minutes played so far this season. But of Zion's top 10 most used 5-man units, 3 to 10 all have him playing the 5. Now, it's smart that the Pelicans are playing Zion with Favors most of the time. It puts a lot less pressure on Zion defensively and on the glass. But with the NBA moving to more pace and space, the Pelicans should continue to ensure that they get Zion the reps at the 5, especially because I can foresee their closing lineup looking that way come playoff time. What I mean to really say here is for as good as Zion is, the Pelicans need to put him in unique situations in order to properly optimize him as a player and truly find out what's best for him. I believe the adage of learning more in uncomfortable situations definitely applies here. Then there's Brandon Ingram. We all know Ingram had a monster breakout campaign this year, and as a free agent this offseason will be a hot commodity. Opposing fans though need to stop dreaming that this guy will be anywhere but New Orleans next year, because he's a restricted free agent and the Pelicans are absolutely 100% going to give this man the max he deserves. At just 22 years old, the sky's the limit for Ingram, who can do virtually everything on the court and has the tools to continue improving. While he may be the number 2 guy on the team moving forward, the Pelicans need to show him that they value him even just as much as they do Zion, and they can do that by giving him the max at this stage. Then, on the court, and even with the way they market this team, it's important to highlight Ingram's value to make sure he isn't a distant second to the Zion phenomenon, else he may turn disgruntled. The final major core piece is Lonzo Ball. Ball is an extremely polarizing player whose strengths as an elite passer, defender, and stat sheet stuffer can all be argued against by a low field goal percentage and terrible free throw percentage. The good thing about Ball is that like Ingram, he's only 22 years old and has grown leaps and bounds as a 3-point shooter. He's also finally been healthy, having not missed a game since the beginning of December. Considering his youth, the Pelicans should push Ball to expand his offensive game, as I believe the former number 2 overall pick can still grow into a starting point guard for a championship level team. But the real question for the Pelicans about Ball is how much is he really worth, considering the Pels can offer him an extension by this offseason, and committing to him would limit their flexibility moving forward. With that said, it's now time to talk about how the Pelicans have to manage their contracts and assets. One of the worst moves the Pelicans made during the Anthony Davis era was signing 7-foot Omer Asik to a 5-year, $60 million deal. That deal was a major anchor in the Pelicans' ability to add more talent to help Anthony Davis. Again, the current Pels already have a lot of young pieces, but they need to maintain flexibility moving forward whilst prioritizing their young studs. They need to weigh the overall value of the veterans that they do have on the roster, starting with the best one of all, Jrue Holiday. Holiday is an elite defender and an all-around offensive weapon who many NBA players refer to as the most underrated player in the league. But the fact that Jrue clearly has value within the league shows that the Pelicans can get a hefty return for him. Holiday has a big contract but can be a free agent by the 2021 offseason should he decline his $27 million player option. He just turned 30, so his timeline is against that of the young Pelicans, plus the team already has a couple of young guns who play the same position and are enough to keep them competitive despite the loss of an all-star level player. The Pels can dangle Holiday in front of pseudo-contenders and hope to steal another talented player to fit their timeline. Maybe Denver would listen for a package highlighted by Michael Porter Jr., maybe the Heat would give up a few of their youngins to form an elite defensive duo to attract Giannis. Another veteran wing the Pelicans should shop is JJ Redick, who has a spicy $13 million expiring contract next season. Every contender in the world will want a 45% three-point shooter who is also well-liked in NBA locker rooms. Some David Griffin magic could help the Pelicans steal another late first-rounder in a Redick exchange, or maybe one of those loose pieces in Brooklyn to send JJ back home. The one veteran I think the Pels should spend their money to keep is Derek Favors, who quietly operates as one of the best low-post defenders and defensive rebounders in the NBA. At this moment, Favors has the best on-off net rating on the team at plus 10.9, and as I alluded to earlier, is perfectly suited to relieve Zion of whatever dirty work that may hamper his long-term success. He turns 29 years old in July, making him the perfect man to have for the next 2 to 3 years, while Jackson Hayes continues to grow into a more NBA-ready player. With the current NBA market amidst the pandemic and the lowering value of traditional bigs, the Pelicans should be able to get him at a reasonable price this offseason, and that's important as the Pels figure that alongside their abundance of young players in line for contract extensions. Okay, I have to admit, I don't know much about coaching. And when watching the NBA and looking at even the most advanced stats, coaching has always been one of the most difficult variables to take into consideration. And Pelicans coach Alvin Gentry may be one of the more polarizing coaches in the league right now. Gentry has had a solid recent track record prior to his time with New Orleans, most notably as an assistant coach on the 2015 Golden State Warriors title team. With the Pelicans, Gentry has been rather mediocre beyond the one marvelous coaching job in the Pelicans' first-round sweep of the Blazers in 2018. But for the most part, his shortcomings have been excusable, plagued by injury-riddled Pelican seasons and Anthony Davis tantrums. This season was no different. By the middle of December, the Pelicans had the second most cumulative missed games in the entire NBA. It's thus easy to give credit to Gentry when looking at the 2020 turnaround from the Pelicans, and then automatically anoint him as the coach of the future for this team. As I've alluded to earlier, the Pelicans are going to need a coach that is going to value player development, be willing to experiment, and still try to put wins on the board. While he's had his stubborn moments in his time with the Pelicans, Gentry has shown in a small sample size that he's at least willing to experiment with Zion and use his pieces in different ways. It will be interesting to see how Gentry balances the roster when the season resumes, especially if the Pelicans manage to sneak into the playoffs. But unless the Pels are a train wreck in their next 8 games, my personal choice is to ride Gentry out even into next season to see what he can do with a full roster, especially considering the fact that his contract ends in 2021. The team will likely be carrying most of the same pieces into next year, and while I know the Pels fans have constantly said this about Gentry, next season, knock on wood, should finally be the time they get a full year to properly evaluate their coach. Additionally, a big reason why I also believe in keeping Gentry into 2021 is that the coaching market doesn't look too hot right now. The hottest name may be Kenny Atkinson, who did a decent job in Brooklyn, but I think a lot of people still can't vehemently say that he is a good NBA coach. The rest of the names will mostly be unproven assistants or past coaches with shaky recent histories. Give me another year of Gentry, then we can get back to this one in 2021. Can you picture a world where the New Orleans Pelicans are NBA champions? The New Orleans Pelicans. Or even just title contenders? I have to admit that it feels rather weird. Because picturing the Pelicans as the league darling or as a competent and noteworthy organization is the same as imagining the school's fly on the wall suddenly on top of the class, especially when he's tried to speak out before and failed on multiple occasions. But this franchise has a third shot to establish itself within the NBA ecosystem. By letting go of their past demons and addressing the proper pillars to success, they just might be able to reel in loyalty from their local fan base and ultimately no longer be an afterthought amongst the NBA teams. Thank you for watching this video on the New Orleans Pelicans. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more of this content, and if you like team analysis like this, check out the video on your screen right now. And I'll catch you in the next one.